everybody, it's Emily at Arg Schooling, and today we're going to be talking about some recommendations for historical graphic novels. In my quest to come up with recommendations for the Build Your Library Reading Challenge, I thought it would be fun if I chose a few of the prompts to do some recommendation videos. So today's video is recommending historical graphic novels. So the first book I want to recommend is Red Harvest. This is by Michael Cherkas, and this is an adult graphic novel, and it is about the Holodomor, which is a famine in Ukraine during the 1930s. So this is a really great introduction to that time period. I've only read, I think, one other book that had to do with this topic, and it was a middle grade, so I was excited to find something for adults. And I thought the way that this topic was handled was very good. This is written as a sort of memoir, but it's not a memoir exactly. So he's writing this book from the perspective of a man who is in his 80s, and he's recounting what happened to him. He's the only survivor of his entire family, and he's telling his grandchildren or his son, I don't remember, about his experiences and what happened to his family and why he is the way he is today. And so you go back to 1927 and you meet his whole family. They're living in a very prosperous village in Ukraine, and they live in a farming village. His father owns 100 acres of land, and they're very well off until Stalin starts this whole building these collectives and making all the farmers join a collective and give all of their food that they are producing to the government, essentially. And so that destroys the villages and causes this massive famine. And I thought this was just really well done. The art style is very stark. It's all in black and white. It almost looks like a hurried sketch, which goes really well, I think, with the story being told. And I highly recommend this. It's a topic that I don't think gets told enough. I've very rarely seen books on this. And so I think this is a great way to be introduced to the topic. I've recommended this book many times, but I will of course recommend it many more. This is The Best We Could Do by T. Boy, and this is a memoir that the author wrote about her family and their experience as Vietnamese refugees during the Vietnam War, and how the experience of having to flee your country has affected the whole family throughout their lives. This book was beautiful and heartbreaking and very moving to read. The art style goes really well with the story. It's beautifully done in very simple color schemes, and I just thought the story was excellent. I love reading books like this. I love memoirs. I love reading about people's lives and the different ways that events have shaped those lives. And so I thought this was really well done. And again, this is a book I would recommend for older teens and adults. Something for the middle grade audience is Cub. This is by Cynthia L. Copeland. I adore this book. This is a middle grade memoir, and it's set in the 1970s, and it's about a girl who wants to be a journalist. And in the 1970s, women were not seen as being able to be journalists. So she meets a girl who is doing that, and she gets to shadow her at her work, and it's a very eye-opening experience for her, but also one that really shapes her life in the future as she learns to write more and become a journalist. So I just thought this was really well done, and I highly recommend it. Another great middle grade graphic novel is Hidden. This is by Loic Dovalier and Mark Lozano and Greg Salcedo. This is a story about a girl in France whose family sends her into hiding during World War II. And so you're following this perspective of, I think she's 5 years old, as she's sent into hiding, and you're learning about what happened to her from her perspective. So she doesn't fully understand everything going on around her, but I think this is an excellent introduction to the Holocaust in that time period for children because it's told in a way that is easy for them to understand. It isn't overly graphic. You're following a child who's in hiding, and you know that bad things are happening, but it doesn't go into a lot of detail about what those bad things are exactly. And I just think this is an excellent way to bring up that conversation and talk about things like the Holocaust with younger children. I would recommend this one for kids as young as 8 if you read it with them. Then I have Displacement. This is by Kiku Hughes, and this is a story about the Japanese internment camps during World War II. And I absolutely love the way this book is written. It's excellent. This is a sort of a time travel-ish kind of a story, but it's done similarly to Kindred, if you've ever read that, where the time travel is not something that the person has any control over. So we're following this character who's being like sucked back into time, and she's meeting her grandmother and her learning about what happened to her during the war years and experiencing the internment camps. And like the way this is written is beautifully done. It's so good. This is such a great story about generational trauma and how something that's happened to a past relative can affect everyone in the family down the line. And I highly recommend this one. It's one of my favorite graphic novels I've ever read, and I just think it's a really important work. Of course, I have to recommend Anne Frank's diary, the graphic adaptation. This is such a good version of the diary if like you feel like you want to introduce Anne Frank to your children, but reading the diary seems tedious to them. Maybe they don't want to read the whole thing. Maybe you just want to give like a little crash course. This is a great way to do that. This is exactly what it says it is. The author has taken the diary and like broken it into a very easily digestible book. There are still passages you can see that are taken completely out of the diary, but there are others that are done as illustration, and it's just beautiful to look at. Like the art in this is stunning. And I just really loved the way it was adapted. I think this is a very approachable book for younger readers who want to know more about World War II, about Anne Frank, about the Holocaust and that sort of thing. I gave this to my daughter to read. I think she read this last year when she was 13. So I'm going to have her read the actual diary soon. But I thought this would be a great way to introduce that, to start the conversation. And I've been talking about this book a lot recently, but I have to recommend it because it's great. This is Courage to Dream, Tales of Hope in the Holocaust, and this is done by Neil Shusterman. So this is a collection of stories about the Holocaust, all to do with different aspects of it. So we have a story about people in hiding. We have a story about resistance in the camps. We have another story about resistance outside of the camps and what that looked like. We have a story about how the people of Denmark helped keep the Nazis from taking the Jews in their country. We have a story in here about like the effects of the Holocaust on the Jewish nation. It's just a really well done series of stories. They all include a bit of a magical element and some like Jewish folklore and that sort of thing. Like there's a Gollum story in here. It's really well done. This is an excellent introduction to the Holocaust if you want to give this to a young teen who maybe hasn't done a lot of studying on that topic yet. I think this is a great way to broach it because the author does intersect each of the stories with like background information on the story they just read. I want to recommend Wake by Rebecca Hall. This is the hidden history of women-led slave revolts. I love books like this. This is part memoir, part history. So this would be classified as nonfiction. You're reading about the author and her life as she's researching the book that she's writing. So you're getting the story that she's writing about these women-led slave revolts, but also you're experiencing her life as she's working on this memoir. So it's like 2 stories in one, and I love that. I love getting insight into like what goes into writing a book. How does one do all this research? How does the research affect them as they're learning about it? So this is really great. It's got very stark illustrations again, but I think for a story like this, that works really well. And I just thought this was excellent. I want to recommend another nonfiction. This is The Middle Ages, A Graphic History, and this is by Eleanor Janega and Neil Max Emanuel. This is a really interesting one because it is part has regular writing. It's not all panels. There are a lot of panels though. But this is an excellent resource for studying the Middle Ages. I don't know that I've come across a more readable book about that time period because this covers so much. I think most of us, when we hear Middle Ages, we immediately picture medieval England, but that was only one tiny element of the medieval European experience. England is this tiny island up here. There's a whole continent of stuff happening, and I don't think we get enough of that element in other resources, so I loved that you get so much here. This covers so much information about what life was like, about different events that were happening, so much stuff, so many interesting people to read about. So many things that I just did not ever come across in most homeschooling resources for elementary and middle school levels. So I think this is a great resource to have on your shelves. But also I recommend checking it out for yourself if you're a parent, because I learned a ton. And finally, I want to recommend the United States Constitution, a graphic adaptation. This is done by Jonathan Hennessy, and this is a really great resource to have on your shelves. And obviously read by yourself, with your kids, whatever. This does such a good job of explaining what the Constitution is, why it was written, what it means. They break it down really well. So you're getting the history behind when it was being written and the way their lives would affect the writing of the Constitution, what was happening in that period of time. And it also breaks down in detail what each thing in the Constitution is and what it means and how it affects us today, how it would have affected people then, and I think this is an important resource. It's very approachable, very readable. I'm reading this right now with my 14-year-old. I figure going into an election year, we want to study as much as we can about the Constitution, the election process, and all of that. So we're starting here, and we're just reading a little bit each week and kind of breaking it down and talking it through as we read. And I just think this is an important book to read with your kids, to have on your shelves. I think it's a great refresher for adults because, let's be honest, a lot of us need a little bit of a refresher every once in a while on this kind of stuff. So definitely recommend this. I'd say if you're reading it with your kids, I would recommend this for maybe 12 and up. So there you have it. I've recommended you 10 historical graphic novels. I hope I've given you something to choose from as you are choosing books to read for the Build Your Library Reading Challenge this year. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your favorite historical graphic novels? I'd love to hear about it, especially if you could recommend me something new. I'm always looking for new things. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video and you want to see more things like it, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye!